Let's take a look at radical behaviorism, which is the focus of Chapter 2. In radical behaviorism, we're talking about views that learning is behavior. Some of the early views of radical behaviorism came from Watson, Hull, and Tolman. Watson suggested that psychology should be concerned only with objective data, only with those things we can see. We don't want to worry about thinking. We don't want to worry about what's going on in someone's mind. Hull suggested that there are some things inside of us that influence how we respond, and that we don't just respond to a stimulus, but in fact there's something out in the environment we may or may not choose to respond to it, and some of the things that help us determine whether or not we're going to respond are internal. So maybe we're trying to get somebody to answer a question in class, and maybe we want to say, okay, we are going to offer an M&M to anybody, or a little small package of M&Ms to anybody who answers a question in class, and maybe some kids are responding and others aren't. Hull would say, well, that's because maybe some people don't like M&Ms. Maybe some people are full, so they don't want any M&Ms. And so those are internal things that might mitigate your response to behavior. Tolman suggested that behavior was guided by purpose or habit strength, and he said that we don't behave just because there's a stimulus telling us that we should behave in a particular way. We behave in a particular way because we have a purpose, because we have an intention. And again, that involves some thinking. And Skinner said he wanted to avoid all sorts of mentalism. He didn't want to focus on anything that had to do with inference, internal workings, thinking. He only wanted to establish relationships between the environment and behavior. And Skinner suggested that all behavior was explainable by looking at environmental cues and results. So he came up with the basics of operant conditioning, and there are some, basic principles that we want to look at in operant conditioning. Okay? So one thing that we want to look at with operant conditioning is that all behavior is emitted by the organism. So behavior is something that the organism puts out. And the contingencies of reinforcement, or the way operant conditioning works, is shown in this basic SRS relationship, with the first S being the discriminative stimulus, the second S being the operant response, there's the R, and the second element, the R, is the operant response, and the second S is the contingent stimulus. This is also known as the ABCs of conditioning, okay? With A being the antecedent, what comes first, the B being the behavior that's brought about by the antecedent, and the C being the consequence, the thing that comes about, that will influence, goodness gracious. There's certain keystrokes that I obviously can't do, okay? Let's see if we can make this work. Okay, now we're done writing. Okay, and the C being the consequence that determines whether or not that behavior will occur again. So let's look at it again. Discriminative stimulus or antecedent, that's something in the environment. This brings about an operant response or a behavior, okay? And how likely that behavior is to occur again is dependent upon the contingent stimulus or the consequence. Do we like what we get when we do the behavior? If so, we're likely to do that behavior again. If not, we won't, okay? So let's look again at how this works. Here's an example. We have a discriminative stimulus or an antecedent. The teacher puts her fingers to her lips. Okay, can't click there. What behavior does that signal? It signals kids to get quiet. Then the teacher says, nice job, I appreciate how well you listened to me. That teacher praise is the consequence or the contingent stimulus. And what do you think will happen? Probably the kids will be quiet the next time the teacher raises her fingers to the lips, because she praised them for getting quiet. Now, if we have a teacher who puts her fingers to the lips, the kids get quiet, and the teacher says, I should not have told you to be quiet. You should know to be quiet, and you didn't get quiet fast enough. There's a punishment that immediately follows that getting quiet, and Skinner would predict that the next time the teacher raises her fingers to the lips, the kids are not going to be quiet because there's no reward for doing so. So pause this video for just a minute and view the Skinner video clip. I hoped to be able to embed video within the video, but it doesn't work that way, so we have to pause periodically. Okay. There's two basic principles to operant conditioning. There's reinforcement and there's punishment. Reinforcement always increases or maintains behavior. By definition, it increases or maintains behavior. If you try to get a student to engage in a behavior and you reward them and their behavior doesn't increase or stay the same, you've only attempted to reinforce. You have not, in fact, actually reinforced. So reinforcement will always increase or maintain a behavior, and punishment always decreases a behavior. Again, if you offer a child a consequence and their behavior does not decrease, you have not actually punished that behavior. You have attempted punishment. So the determination of whether something is reinforcement or punishment is not based on whether or not we attempt to reinforce and punish. It's based on what actually occurs. If the behavior increases, in fact, we have reinforced. If a behavior decreases, we have in fact punished. Let's say that we seat a child by the teacher's desk every time the child acts out in class. If they start goofing off, they have to come sit over here by the teacher's desk. Well, now this child continues to act up. They act up more and more and more. They increase their behavior. What does that tell you? Maybe they like sitting by the teacher's desk. Maybe that makes them feel special. So we have tried to punish a behavior, but in fact we've reinforced it. Okay, now just take a minute to look at the reinforcement versus punishment video clip and the sort of humorous example of operant conditioning that I have. Well, goodness gracious. Okay, there's my fly-in. Sorry about that. I didn't intend to put that animation in, and at this point I've tried to redo this video 4 or 5 times, and we're just going to stay where we are. Alright, let's look at the basics of reinforcement and punishment. There are 2 types of reinforcement and 2 types of punishment.